Dun, dun, dun. And just like that, the Brooklyn Nets season takes a bit of a dramatic turn as Kevin Durant goes down with an injury. We're going to dive in on the timeline for his recovery, the impact it's going to have on the roster and the rotations, and whether or not the Nets as an organization need to adjust what their goals may have been ahead of the trade deadline, the buyout market, to make sure they solidify the championship run they want to go on, Doug.
Oh, buddy, we try to keep it. We try to keep it a little chipper. More, it's a good thing we did this podcast on Sunday and not Saturday night, because I would not have been in a good place around this injury piece.
Little breather. We're okay.
We got a little more information now. It's not the end of the world, but the team's gonna look different here for the short term and maybe a little longer. We're gonna get into it all, but first, the theme music.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Brooklyn, yo.
Oh, yes, it's the Locked On Nets podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He is Doug Norrie, owner-operator DFSR, all your daily fantasy projections, FanDuel, DraftKings, he's got you covered. I am Adam Armbrecht, breaking it down on OGP, the One Giant Podcast, with my boy Andy Mack. And this is that bittersweet moment. We're only a couple games after feeling like we saw the perfection that was the Brooklyn Nets at full strength. Now we come in with the unfortunate news that Kevin Durant sprains his MCL, timeline 4 to 6 weeks. Doug, how are we feeling as we work our way through a weekend?
I don't think I would have called it bittersweet. I would stop at bitter and leave off the sweet part.
Bitter pill to swallow, right?
Yeah, dude, it's just such a bummer. Like, it just feels, I'm not going to go down the road of, people are like, oh, this franchise cursed. I saw plenty of people use the cursed word out there.
I don't think that's how that works, but yeah.
No, but like, I will say it does feel like something like the timeline.
We can't have nice things. I'll tell you that.
This is what it is. It's really crazy around how they just cannot keep these guys on the court all at the same time, like for whatever reason. And the Kevin Durant thing is a very just unlucky play. It happens. Like, it's no one's fault. It's not because he played more. Like, it wasn't like, an injury related to overstress. It was just, Bruce Brown got caught up and banged into his knee. Like, it was just no one's fault, and it wasn't nothing dirty about it. So anything like that. And
it's a shame on Durant for going over for help defense. How, what are you doing? What are you doing, guy?
I will say
playing team basketball.
There's a part of me that this whole season, basically since he came back and we saw him for the first time since the ACL injury, there has been a part of me that has lost little bits of my life every time he's fallen down this season. Like, or every time he's fallen down or like looked a little awkward or something went a little wrong, my heart would just mini stop for a second. And actually, it was funny because during this play, I actually had gotten up to go do something else and came back to saw him walking off the court. Like, I went to like, get a drink or something. And I came back and I saw him walk into the locker room and my heart like stopped. And then I had to rewind. I rewound the game real quick to see what had happened. And each time I never went back far enough because I could just hear the announcers talking like, oh, it didn't look good. I'm like, oh no. And it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse for me. So yeah, this is just, we'll talk about all the ramifications, but it's just a bummer. And it's just going to be, a couple months without Durant now. Thankfully, the timeline can have him coming back at some point, but it's really just throws another major monkey wrench in their season.
No, it's disheartening to say the least. Around the timeline, as it stands, they say 4 to 6 weeks. But whether by NBA, by the fact that you can't fully commit to a timeline, not knowing what the recovery process is going to be like, and then the Nets layer of things, where we know the Nets are vague at best about At best, they're vague around when you can expect the guys back. Right now, you're experiencing it with it. I'm not putting it on the Nets or anything, but we heard 2 weeks ago, a little more, that Joe Harris was about to get back out on the court a little bit and ramping up. And then you've heard nothing about that ever since then, because it's kind of like, or maybe he will, maybe he won't. So
the thing with Harris too,
the
thing with Harris too is the original, even if you just forget what they said 2 weeks ago, their original timeline was 4 to 8 weeks originally. And we're already past the 8-week timeline on that from when he originally got hurt.
I think Nash had said too that like he got back out. They said, it's been a difficult recovery for Joe Harris, right? And that's a part of recovering from any injury. So, this 4 to 6 week timeline, even if call it 8 weeks, right? Just to be safe. When you start to look at where the season's going to be and how the timeline fleshes out, like this does butt up. This is going to butt up to the end of the season and wondering if Kevin Durant, when he comes back, they say that the full recovery is expected. It's not the type of injury that you think he's going to come back and there's going to be complications there. So assuming full health upon his return, but then it's still about, as we say with all these injuries, getting back into basketball shape and what the expectations are going to be around that as well.
Yeah, and I was just looking out, so if we plot out the graph of where, because there's no way, I'll tell you right now, just based on the Nets history with this, there's just no way it's never on the shorter end of the timeline ever. Like any of their stuff, maybe that's just bad luck, maybe that's just how they deal with like originally reporting injuries. I don't know what it is, but it really seems like ever since we've started doing this, at least the injury timelines never come on the short side. It doesn't seem like. So I'm gonna go 6 weeks at minimum, and then like you said, probably something like 8 weeks. And if that's if we're looking at 2 months away, then you're looking at basically the end of February. And there's still some regular season left, but not tons, like 15, 20 games, something like that, to ramp back up. And I just think, look, he's going to be back. And so that's the good news. And it really only starts mattering at the playoffs. But now we're just another season in of these three guys have played like no minutes together. It's nuts. It's crazy. Considering how much time they've been given at this point, like to have so few minutes out of the three, because these just kind of cavalcade of crap that's happened between injuries and more injuries and other stuff, and then Kyrie just like randomly sitting out, and then like the vaccine thing, like it's just one thing after another. And
James Harden, the least injured player in NBA history, going down with a hamstring in the before the playoffs last year, right? Like all of these things keep piling up. Yep.
Yeah, and at some point it's just like when does it stop? And now it's just going to be like, at least let's just take them for their word and say 6 weeks. Now it's just going to be another 6 weeks of figuring it out and like what happens here. And it's just really, really hard as a team, and they'll probably be fine for the stretch, but it's really, really hard as a team to lose a guy who's basically in the top 3 conversation for MVP this season. Right? Like that's what they're losing.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you too, because we're going to get to kind of the rotations and how they solve that, and then some bigger picture questions maybe for the Nets as an organization, especially with the trade deadline coming up and buyout market, et cetera. But just specifically around this injury, does this impact your outlook on the Nets? If we assume, even if we say he gets back with 15 games left in the regular season and he's good to go, does that loss of time, does the 2 months that you're not going to be with him, do you think that will be a detriment to their title chances and whatever impact it comes? Because I don't want to go too much into the other players here, but just you've lost Kevin Durant for those number of games. I've heard some fans saying things like, "Hey, silver lining, Kevin Durant will be super rested," and I like going glass half full. I feel like that's probably like glass 90% full when the reality is you never want anyone to get injured ever, and I don't think you can ever take that tactic, right? The protocols when Kevin Durant got into it, when Harden got into it, the silver lining there was the rest piece because they're totally healthy and fine coming out of it. This is different. And I just wondered if you feel like this is a bit of a blow to what their plans are, or to what their ultimate goal is of winning a championship. Does that matter at all given when the injuries occurred?
Okay, so their odds did drop a little bit. BetOnline championship odds dropped to plus 275. They're still the odds-on favorite over the Warriors, and then there's kind of a gap to the Bucks. But I think in general, I would say high level, no, it does not impact my thought process too much because it's not what is considered to be a long-term injury. Like there's no surgery. It's just, just recuperation. And that is just the way it is. Where you have to probably worry a little bit is that all the time he's not on the court, he's just not on the court. You can't really start feeling good about it until he comes back. Right. And I hate to couch it that way because it's just sort of it's not a non-answer, but it has to ding them because every minute that he's not on the court, you just don't know if he's coming back at all. I guess is what I mean by that. And so, we strongly suspect he will, right? And he'll be fine. And sprains happen, and this is just what it is. But it has to make you just a little bit worried because he's just not going to play for like a long time now. And I think that's where I kind of land with it. So I'm not really. I'm devastated about my over wins bet because that's not happening now. Like at the 56.5. So like that's turn that card
fading
to dust. Yeah. Throw that one in the trash. But I think overall, I'm not devastated by it, except that it's just like another major bummer for a season because we're going to get, 6 weeks or whatever without Kevin Durant. And it's just 6 more weeks of these guys not playing together. I know we have other stuff that we want to cover from this, like how this is all going to break down. First, cha-ching, baby. You know that sound. That is the sound of another sale through Shopify, the all-in-one commerce platform for you to start, run, and grow your business. Shopify is it really kind of has leveled the playing field when it comes to creating companies and having them grow along with you. These kind of tools used to just be available for the big boys and gals out there. Not anymore. Shopify can give you a user-friendly experience that established business or even new ones can use to sell everywhere, synchronize online in-person sales effortlessly, stay informed with all of the data that you need. Shopify can help you grow with the detailed reporting, the conversion rates, profit margins, and beyond. All the stuff that you're going to get into once you start your business. You can connect those social accounts too: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and more, all there seamlessly through Shopify. You go to shopify.com/LockedOnNBA, just like our podcast network, all lowercase, shopify.com/LockedOnNBA for a free 14-day trial. You get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. Grow your business with Shopify today. Go to shopify.com/LockedOnNBA right now. Shopify.com/LockedOnNBA.
And of course, thanks for making us your first listen every single day. We're free on all those great platforms. Be sure to support us as we support you with delicious information around the Brooklyn Nets. We talk about then rotations and the impact that it's going to have for this team over the next month, one day shy of a month. The Nets will play 12 out of 15 games on the road. That's a really big positive in this because the first piece you automatically go to is, well, you have Kyrie on the road, and a lot of people have pointed to this. We haven't gotten Harden and Kyrie together on the court. We know that can be a really dynamic combination. But the other interesting thing was that I think I was kind of picking up on is, well, some people said, well, this is where you really want to lean into Kyrie having not played all season long, or the first 40 games of the season, effectively 38. Harden, this is a guy who's an Iron Man. Get him out there and run him. But my first thought was, that's what you don't want to do here, right? What you don't want to do is overtax your other two superstars while Kevin Durant's away, because you end up running into potentially the same issues they've had, being worn down the stretch of the season, maybe having another injury pop up, and not being at full strength going into the playoffs. So when you look at this roster right now, do you have in your mind, I'm saying replacing Kevin Durant as in he physically won't be on the court, not just who do we plug in to replace those minutes in scoring, but how do you see them looking at these rotations and effectively replacing the 40-plus minutes that Kevin Durant gives you?
Yeah, so I don't think you need to go totally crazy with the minutes and like try to chase wins at every opportunity. I just think they're a good enough team that the wins will just be there. I like sometimes basketball, like we said before, is predictable in this way. They still just have plenty of talent. Like if you have, and they do get, I mean, I hate to use this word, but they get a little lucky with the way the schedule breaks here. Cause like you said, they go 4 in a row on the road. Then they get LA. Oh, we'll be at that game. And Denver. And then they go back on the road for another 5 games too, that's going to be a tough swing because that's Golden State, Phoenix, you get Utah and Denver in there. But in all, to have those games where Kyrie is available is like, if it was going to happen, if it was going to happen, it's like not the worst thing that had happened right now, because you can push Kyrie a little bit here and he gives you just such dynamic playmaking. So I don't think you want to go crazy. I don't think you want to chase the wins. There's no world, I don't think, where they're at threat of like missing the playoffs or something like that. So I don't think any of that stuff really changes too much of how you like view the time going forward here, except to say Kyrie and Harden are just going to be asked to do a lot more now. Like, Durant's been a massive bailout piece for them. Durant's been a massive bailout piece for them on offense this season, but the offense will just look a little different now because he's not going to be around. And we've seen that operate okay too if they have enough shooters, which they do with Kyrie on the court.
So for me, because when I look at it too, obviously this last game, you saw the best game out of Kessler Edwards of his young career. We know that we've been seeing some more from Cam Thomas. We've been seeing more usage, at least, of Day'Ron Sharpe in the absence of Claxton and LaMarcus Aldridge as well. Like I look at it just from a filling the minutes and stemming the tide. I look at the young players first and foremost and say those are the first guys that I would just give them more minutes, not because I think any one of them is going to be more effective than another player, but the great example would be Patty Mills, right? We were just talking about now everyone starts to get back healthy. Now Patty Mills can slide back into his role. The thing that I probably wouldn't want to do is burn out Patty Mills over the next X number of games, over the next month and a half potentially, so that he maybe does become somewhat useless or diminished when it comes to the playoffs. You would like to think that all these young guys with their legs, Kessler Edwards, he was already there. We already said we wanted to see him in the starting lineup. But even Day'Ron Sharpe, whose development is going to be difficult, I'd probably say, listen, as many games as we think the matchup is good enough or you're not going to get totally, burnt in a particular assignment, we're going to put you out there for as many of 20 to 25 minutes that we possibly can, and more if it's available, because then it'll save LaMarcus Aldridge's legs. It'll save some Claxton legs. Like, that's where I keep looking at. Every single veteran player that you think has value to this team, I try to make sure that I couch their minutes, and this includes Kyrie and Harden, by the way. When you talk about those 4-game road trip and then another 5-game road trip, I don't necessarily, I know Kyrie just came back and you want him to be fully informed, but I don't want to see Harden and Kyrie going for 40 to 45 minutes every single one of those games together, understanding there's going to be wins and losses, but I just think you can't lose sight of the ultimate goal and just be thinking about wanting to win on a night-to-night basis. We'll get into the impact of what they need to think about around the playoff picture and around seeding, et cetera. But that's my first thought is do not burn out anybody else and let the rookies play. Let them take a lot of lumps here. Even David Duke Jr. Go ahead, run them out there because you just do not want to risk diminishing your veterans. And there's really 4 of them: Kyrie, Harden, Aldridge, and Mills. Those are the most important guys you don't want to burn out.
I totally agree. You don't need to just go absolutely pedal to the metal here with wanting to win every game. I think, where we could see some trickiness around that is if for some reason things start off poorly on this road trip, and they drop a couple games, because I'm realizing the playoff picture might have been a little tighter than I anticipated it to be here in the East, because the East is just pretty good. It's still not something I'm worried about, but there's a world where they drop 3 or 4 or something like that. And I told you, that West Coast swing at the end of this gets pretty dicey because they run into some really, really good teams there. There is a world where things do get hit a little harder than you think they're going to. And now the playoff picture becomes a little muddy. Again, so much can happen and there's lots of season left, but I'm totally with you around. You can't overdo it now. You cannot hit the panic button here and play these guys 40 plus minutes a game every night for the next 6 weeks. They're not going to do that, but just because you're worried about catching a win here or there, because that would really negatively impact the playoff picture for them if they're just putting themselves more at risk for injuries, which playing lots of minutes will do for you.
Knowing then also too, when you think about the fact you still only have Kyrie for road games, I was thinking about whether or not. So obviously Kyrie and Harden together give you the best chance to win on the road. But what is the home schedule going to look like? Right, they're few and far between. And oddly enough, I didn't bring this up last episode where the Nets are a 500 team at home. Right, they're actually incredibly successful on the road, and they have a hard time at home. I wonder also if you would say, so in these road games, we're going to use Kyrie and Harden because that is the most effective rotation to be putting out there. And the home games, we won't have Kyrie automatically. And we may say a lot of home games are going to be when we try to reserve James Harden, knowing that he's best utilized on the road with Kyrie. And that's where maybe it is more Cam Thomas and then even more Patty Mills. So that's the other balance too. Less Patty Mills in road games. I don't mean bench him. I just 20 to 25. And then you ask him for 35 at home. Cam Thomas, you try to say 15 to 20 on the road and then ramp up for 25, 30, 35 minutes at home because you're going to need them. I wonder how Nash and the Nets will look at that as opposed to maybe the other way going less Harden minutes on the road, knowing that you're going to need a veteran to lead them for these handful of home games. In the short term, it doesn't matter with how many they have on the road, but it's still a big picture question that they're going to need to figure out. Do you lean one way or the other? Because again, when you highlight that second stretch of 5 games on the road and the teams they play, there's games where Harden and Kyrie play those games together and they still lose all of those, or 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5. So that's the other piece is we said this before, banging your head against it, running long minutes and then not getting the win doubles down on the cost factor.
Yeah. I think I just need to, I'm gonna pause this thought, I think, a little bit just to see how like these first 4 games go. I think that kind of will matter. I think this first early stretch where they hit the road in these next 4 or 5 games will tell a lot of the story about how it's 4 games. With like a couple of not so great teams in there, like Washington and San Antonio. So it's like not the worst stretch here, and Minnesota's kind of whatever. But I think in general, I'm going to reserve my feelings about this. I say you play it just, status quo right now, see how it goes, and then we'll kind of reevaluate. And they're just gonna need to get more scoring out of some of these young guys, especially like Cam. You're gonna see more minutes from him. Thankfully, Edwards has kind of made an adjustment. Like, looks like he's like an actual just real NBA player at this point, which is a fantastic just thing to kind of have happened. It was sort of just happened because of circumstance, because like COVID pushed him all the way into the lineup, and they were like, oh wow, this guy can actually hang. So I think some of this, and we'll talk about this in a second. So I think in general, I'm gonna just hit the pause button on where I think they need to totally go, because I kind of actually just do want to see how these next 4 games turn out.
And it's fair because the experimentation of rosters, lineups, and then wins or losses in these 4 games can then say what you do the next 5 games on the road. And that's how we've seen Nets and Nash do this: is experimentation, and then we'll adjust. So you assume that that's going to be the same process. It's not like they're going to all of a sudden say, what was that plan we had lined up for if we lost Kevin Durant for 6 weeks? That isn't something they have in the playbook. We'll get into more of that and a question around the organization overall as the trade deadline will approach. But first, as you know, friends, it's a new year, and that means New Year's resolutions. If you're about getting fit like this guy, and you're about eating healthier, make sure that you include Built Bar as a part of that plan. It's because Built Bar is a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, maybe even a little bit better, but does not give you all that junk that a candy bar is throwing your way. Built Bar makes it easier to stick to that resolution because you want to be healthy, but you don't want it to get boring. Coated in 100% chocolate, they've got all these different delicious flavors. And when you think about the fact that it gives you 130 calories, just 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein, compare that to a candy bar, which is around 240. It almost hurts to say that calorie total coming out of my mouth. And the grams of sugar, good Lord, 30? No, stop it. You're not going to be doing that. That's why you head over to built.com right now, and you're going to get yourself 15% off on your next order when you use promo code LOCKED15. That's built.com, promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off on your next order.
And when you're done with that, head on over to the aforementioned Bet Online, where your Brooklyn Nets are still plus 275 to win the NBA championship. Still the favorites, even with this Kevin Durant news. Just one of the pieces of action you can get in over at Bet Online. They're rolling through the NFL playoffs right now. NBA obviously headed toward the All-Star break. They got the new and updated website too. Makes it super easy to use, very sleek on the mobile and on desktop. And when you sign up today, you do that for free, but you're going to want to make a deposit. They're going to give you a 50% welcome bonus on that first deposit, but you have to use the promo code Locked On, just like our podcast network. Football, basketball, hockey, boxing, UFC, sprinkling some Vegas casino games as well. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers BetOnline has for you in 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts.
All right, so I wanted to couch this because it's almost the same thing. What are you going to do with rotations? How worried are you about these different things? Pause button. Let's see what happens in the short term, and we'll start to develop a more concrete thought. But when we talk about the idea of pushing the panic button or having patience, if you're the Brooklyn Nets, from a deadline approaching, do you need to go make a really big splashy trade to fortify your roster? I'm going to go I'll go macro, big picture on this, because if the Nets think that they may want to make a move or they want to bring in a body, let's say the next few weeks here doesn't look so good, you start to take a look. By the way, you mentioned just real quick the standings right now. The Cleveland Cavaliers in the 6th spot are only 2.5 games back, right?
Yeah.
And then you're 5.5, 6. The final spot is held by the New York Knicks in that 10th seed. They're 6 games behind right now. So there is some wiggle room there, and you can. I feel more than comfortable saying the Nets can tread water. There's no real risk there. But if you're thinking about making a move from a macro standpoint, do you worry about young names, Kessler Edwards, Day'Ron Sharpe, Cam Thomas, those being the names that are automatically going to get slid back across the table from any team when you say, we'd like to get in a little bit of a stretch big here, we'd like to get another power forward in the room? They go, yeah, sure, not a problem. Don't even worry about the picks. We'll just take Kessler Edwards, no problem. Do you think that the Nets are going to have to just kind of go with it with what they have right now, because the only alternative will be sacrificing some of this young talent.
Yeah, so I don't think that this injury changes probably the Nets' perspective on what they should or should not do. Now, that could mean moving off some of the young guys. I'm not 100% sure about that. I think there's like Kessler Edwards, like just as an example, or Cam Thomas. These guys are good. It's like nice to have a little youth movement. I don't think they're like untouchable by any means, especially if like the player coming on the way back is, a significant upgrade. As we get closer to the deadline, I think we'll probably go through these more through specifics. I don't think that this changes the Nets. I'd be shocked if it changes like how they feel about the season, like knowing that if they feel confident about that timeline and like it's, with a few weeks left to go in the year, I can't imagine they would like make some kind of panic trade to shore up the roster now. But but like I said, that can change pretty darn quickly here. And so there's a world where it happens. Now, I will say, like I said, relative to the young guys, they've gotten some nice stuff out of these dudes. I don't think like any of the guys that you mentioned are future NBA like superstars, right? So I don't think that we can look at them like that. And that's when I say I don't think you can't have anyone be untouchable if it's like a real piece that you're moving up for. I'm not sure that the rest of the league views these guys that way either. Like the sample size is still pretty small on most of them. And like each of the young guys, like they kind of each of them do one or two things well, but none of them are like anywhere near a complete player. Right? Like if you look at the top of the draft from this year, guys that you can say, hey, these guys are like actually going to be like pretty complete dudes, like Cade, Evan Mobley. I'm not sure about Suggs, but like, Barnes to some degree, like these guys are already, sort of like A+ talents coming in. I don't think you can put the Nets young guys like on anywhere close to those levels, but they each do something pretty well that the Nets kind of need right now. So that's good. But in general, I don't think the Nets would see them as untouchable, and I'd be fine doing it if it was an upgrade. I always want to upgrade if you can. So it would just need to be who was coming back. But like I said, I don't think what this injury is going to do is change whatever thought they had about it before. This will not change that, I don't think, for the Nets.
No, it's funny too, because I think over this stretch, you will see just more from all these guys, and maybe it was trending that way anyway. And you can probably confirm some things on them, even in the long term. You can confirm more of what you think Kessler Edwards can be. Can Cam Thomas start to become, respectable defensively as he understands rotations and assignments a little bit better, and the communication picks up? Like, I think you can learn things in the long term about these guys. But as you know, being a fan of young players, the one thing I will say that this injury did bring up for me in my mind was knowing what lays ahead. I'm not going to dwell on this, but knowing what's coming up in the off season, right? With Harden and with Kyrie, and the idea of is Claxton getting an extension? What does that look like? Like, there are kind of big decisions for the Brooklyn Nets. Now, in the short term, it doesn't matter. You sacrifice whatever it takes to win a championship. That's why you sign up. It's why you mortgage everything to get these guys. And also, this is that thing of, no, this is a cursed team or this or that, run afoul, bad luck, maybe. And now all of a sudden you're starting to stare down the end, like the potential end of this journey of these three players together is a lot closer than it is further away. And you start
not for Durant.
But, I know, right? Not for Durant, but but that's actually to my point though, because then you say, okay, but even if we think it could be coming to an end for Harden and Kyrie, these young players, you at least you want to have the sense of, are they important to what we want to move forward with Kevin Durant in whatever capacity, right? Can Cam Thomas be a scoring guard that matters to a championship caliber team that gets reconfigured solely around Kevin Durant? That's my curiosity. And then when it comes to any potential trades, shy of it being the big names, which is what you said, we'll get into it, but they're going to be hard deals for the Nets to swing. I think that it does become important to safeguard around these players, whoever you think you like. I'm not going to tell you that Cam Thomas is a superstar in the league, but however the Nets feel about these guys, I would hate to see them go short-sighted now, only for the fact that you said this before too in passing. Like, name the guys that are out on the market that are going to really come in and be high-impact players for the Brooklyn Nets and swing the tide, and obtainable players, right? That the Nets are going to be able to go out and facilitate a trade for, that are going to mean pushing the Nets over that extra hump of being even more favorites for the championship, right? I don't know if those guys are out there right now and achievable for the Nets. And from that standpoint, that's why I hope they do probably stand pat.
I think just because where they stand with the money and what they can bring back in and like sort of
Right.
like not having tons and tons of assets because of like what they gave up with Harden. I just don't think that like it's probably in the cards anyway. And maybe they just like get saved from having to do it because they just don't have enough. Their powder is not dry enough. You know what I mean? Like they just don't have the stuff in the stable to be able to send back out. And so I think that's probably ultimately that's probably what tells the whole story is like their rookies just aren't good enough to probably command like high value targets. Like a lot of their picks just aren't good enough at this point because of what they sent out with Harden, right? Like they gave so much of that original thing. And like I said, the young players are nice, but they're not superstar kind of guys. They're just like good role. Like right now, they're pretty good. Like role, you can envision them as like nice role pieces for the team, and that's kind of what they need too. Like at some point, you need to get a little younger and cheaper too. Like it's actually the underrated thing about some of these guys is actually that they just make almost no money, and for the Nets, that's actually pretty important.
And by the way, the extra pieces too. It's like you don't have to do anything with these players, or understanding teams may request them, but you have the exemptions. You can go out and do that. You have some money on the books in a Bruce Brown or in a Blake Griffin or in a Millsap that you can package in, and accomplish something. So there are ways for them to still add talent without having to touch these players or without having to go into a relatively bare cupboard when it comes to having 4 second-round picks over the next 6 years, effectively.
Yeah, and like I said, like the Nets have done a pretty good job. Like keeping their picks is probably pretty important because they're just better at using them than most other teams. So like that's a helpful thing. And like I said, like the money is not immaterial at this point with them in the tax. Like if you have role players on your roster that make like basically minimum like rookie minimums and stuff like that, that actually ends up being pretty damn valuable because and that's like that with any sport. If you can get a lot for a little, like that's just a basic easy tenet of any business. So, all right, well, we have a Monday game, 3:00 in the afternoon for MLK Day. It's like kind of rolling all day with hoops. So, might end up podcast. We'll definitely podcast right after the Cleveland game, but just say maybe check your calendars. Maybe you didn't realize it was a 3:00 start. I know sometimes that can just kind of catch people off guard. In the meantime, make sure you head over to YouTube. Man, the YouTube number, we say it at the end of every episode. It's just true each time. Like the YouTube numbers have been great. Comments have been great. We really appreciate everyone that's jumping in over there. So make sure you like and subscribe to the Locked On Nets YouTube channel. As always, the link for that will be in the show notes.
Listen, friends, we're going quote free. Let's just get Kevin Durant happy, healthy. Let's all take a big, deep breath. That's from yours truly, Adam Arbrecht. We're going to be all right.
Oh, Adam Arbrecht, one of the all-time great poets. We will be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.